Hello and welcome back to Lockdown in Lockdown, Day 10. For those of you that are still with us, Alex is not having a nice time inside Furnace Penitentiary, but he's learning the ropes, he's kind of getting through it, he's made some friends, he's made some enemies, but last night the Blood Watch came. Finally, he's been waiting for it to happen since he arrived. Everyone is talking about it. The Weezers came out in the dead of night and they dragged Monty and 4 other prisoners from their cells and took them into the tunnels through the vault door. And nobody knows what is happening to them through there. That's what's just happened. I'm going to move straight on today, partly because I forgot my cup of tea and I can't really survive very long without tea, so I'm going to have to run downstairs and make a cup of tea, and partly because I'm just desperate to find out what happens next, and I hope you are too. Okay, Aftermath. Aftermath? Aftermath. Aftermath? No, that sounds wrong. That would be something that happened after maths. Math. Aftermath. I woke where I'd fallen, bowed up like a baby on the hard stone beneath my bed. Opening my eyes, I saw Donovan on the toilet, but there were no jokes this time. He looked at me like I was something nasty he'd just expelled, then turned his attention to the toilet paper. I hauled myself onto the bunk, my aching limbs protesting about a night spent on the freezing floor. My head was full of the horrors I'd seen during the Blood Watch, but due to an endless series of nightmares afterwards, I wasn't sure which of the images was real and which imagined. The Weezers, with their dirty coats and filthy needles and gas masks sewn into their faces, seemed like something only possible in a twisted dream, but the memory of them was so sharp that I knew they'd really been out there. With a painful churning in my gut, I suddenly remembered Monty, strung up and stabbed with that filthy syringe. Where was he now? What were they doing to him? I put the questions to Donovan, but he simply fixed me with that look of fury again, and I quickly shut up. A couple of sirens later, and we all drifted down to the yard. I had never seen so many dark, tired eyes and drawn faces, so many nervous twitches and tear-stained cheeks. That morning, for once, everybody in Furnace looked their age. All the hard stares and swaggers had been replaced by frightened expressions and anxious shuffles as the children huddled in groups for comfort. Donovan still wasn't talking to me, so I scanned the crowd for Z. He was standing in a group that included his cellmate and a few others, but it took me a while to recognise him. The cocky smile had gone and his face had drawn in on itself, as if he'd lost half his body weight overnight. He saw me looking and walked over, meeting me halfway across the yard. We both opened our mouths to speak, but neither of us seemed to remember how to have a normal conversation. The duty roster materialised on screen, putting me and Donovan back in the kitchen but sending Z to the laundry. I waited for Monty's name to appear, but it had been stripped from the records, as if the boy had never existed. Hard labour was hell that morning. Donovan acted like he couldn't stand the sight of me, posting himself in the canteen, serving up mush and leaving the processing to me and another couple of inmates I'd never really spoken to before. I tried asking questions about the Weezers as we stuffed crate after crate of leftovers into the industrial blender, but they just sent back one-word answers that meant nothing. To make things worse, Kevin Arnold had been assigned to the trough room too, and several times throughout the morning I was ambushed by flying chunks of rancid meat and mushy vegetables and barbed comments. I remembered the way he'd pushed Monty across the cell last night, sending him to his terrifying fate without a shred of remorse. I wanted to stuff his mouth full of rotten food until he choked, but instead I turned my back on him and suffered his abuse. What else could I do? Umpteen hours later, after washing the slop from my hair in the showers and donning a fresh uniform, I found myself standing alone in the yard. I didn't realise how much I'd come to depend on Donovan. Without him by my side, I felt completely lost, utterly vulnerable. I saw him make his way up the stairs to our cell without a backward glance, but I didn't try to chase him. Instead, I picked an empty table towards the back of the yard and cursed myself for not just curling up in bed last night and ignoring the blood watch like everybody else. Holding my head in my hands, I didn't hear Z slide onto the bench opposite me until he coughed gently. "You look like battered crap," he said as I lifted my head. "You're no oil painting yourself, mate," I replied, wondering if I still had the ability to smile. Where's Big D?" he went on. "You two are like Siamese twins. Weird not seeing you joined at the hip." "I'm not in his good books," I replied after a humorless snort. "After last night, I wouldn't stay in bed. Had to see what was going on. He thinks I drew one of them to our cell." "Seriously?" Z asked, eyebrows practically leaping from his forehead. "You saw one up close?" I nodded, trying not to recall the experience in too much detail. "He'll be okay," Z went on, cracking his knuckles. "He can be a moody lug, but I'm sure he'll come around." "I hope so. If he doesn't, then I'm a dead man. He's pretty much the only thing standing between me and the skulls." "Don't forget me," Z said with a grin. He flexed his arms, but the Satsuma-sized bumps beneath his uniform didn't exactly fill me with confidence. I could take them all on single-handed with these muscles. For a moment, it looked like we might break free of the gravity of the situation, but it quickly pulled us back in. "What the hell were they doing last night?" Z asked, leaning across the table so that his low voice would reach me. "What are those things with the gas masks?" I shrugged and shook my head. "I mean, they look like Nazi stormtroopers with those masks and coats. I've seen them on TV. My folks used to watch war documentaries all the time. But why would they be here? And why do you think they need help breathing? I mean, it's not like this place is full of Zyklon B." "They're attached to their faces," I told him. "The masks. I saw it last night. The metal is sewn into their skin." Z looked like he was about to hurl. "No way," was all he managed, but I could tell he believed me. "Whatever they're doing, it's bad," I said. "Donovan told me they took prisoners to a fate worse than death." "Maybe they're using us as human guinea pigs," Z suggested. I laughed at the idea, but he was serious. "During the Second World War, the Nazis and the Japanese army used to perform all these sick experiments on innocent people, civilians and prisoners of war and stuff. They'd cut them up while they were still alive, infect them with all these diseases, biological weapons and gas, blow them up." "Oh, come on," I interrupted, but he held up his hand. "No, seriously, they used prisoners as test subjects. They'd just think of things they could do to them, and then they'd do them. They claimed it was all about science, but they were just butchers. I saw this on TV too, but Dad made me go to bed halfway because it was too gross." "But we're not in a war, Z. I mean, this is one of the most advanced countries in the Western world. You can't even call somebody like a pensioner now without it being politically incorrect. They're not just going to let somebody open a prison where a bunch of sick freaks do experiments on kids." "What about a prison where mutant dogs chew up the inmates?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. Everything changed that summer, Alex. All those gangs on the rampage and all those people who died. People got scared of kids. That's why they got away with building a prison like this. That's why those freaks can take us and butcher us and nobody gives a crap. Did you see who they took anyway? "Monty," I replied. "They took Monty. I didn't see the others." Z swore beneath his breath and stared out across the yard. I thought I saw his eyes filling up for a minute, but then he wiped a hand across his face and was back to normal. "Do you think anyone on the outside has any idea?" he asked. "I don't think anyone on the outside cares. We did the crime, we're doing the time. In their eyes, we're just as bad as the kids who went around killing everyone. What was it that Black Suit said? As far as the outside world is concerned, we're already dead." Somebody in the yard shouted, and I looked over to see two inmates pushing each other, red faces and angry. But it died out after a couple of shoves. One of the boys walking away with his hands held up in submission. "I'm not going to just wait here until I get taken, Z," I said. "I can't just lie down and let them come for me, let them jab me with their filthy needles and haul me off to some butcher shop." "Alex, what choice do you have? Throw yourself off the 8th floor. That's about the only way out I can think of, and it isn't pretty." "I'm just not ready to give up. That's all I'm saying. There's always a way. There's a mile of rock in every direction, and those dogs will chew you up if you even piss the wrong way." I slammed my fist down on the table in frustration. "Didn't you tell me on the first day that you were getting out of here, no matter what?" I asked, ignoring his guilty shrug. That was back when I had a little hope, he muttered. Well, don't lose it just yet, I said, leaning over the table and once again thinking of mountains, of fresh air. I'm telling you, there's a way out. All good prison breaks need a plan. I'd seen them in films so many times, learning the guard rotation, bribing somebody for blueprints of the sewer system, getting your girlfriend to smuggle in a file so you can get through the bars of your window. One good plan, perfectly executed. That's all it would take to get us out of here. But I had nothing. There was no guard rotation here. The monsters in their pinstriped suits seemed to patrol when and where they liked. The sewer system just led further down into the abyss, dumping its filth in the centre of the earth. And even if I'd had a girlfriend, which I didn't and probably never would, we weren't allowed personal visits or letters. Hell, we didn't even have windows. None of the things I'd seen on screen were going to work in Furnace. But that shouldn't really have surprised me. I mean, television isn't real life. On the plus side, my short career as a criminal had programmed my mind to find escape routes wherever I could. From the second I arrived at a target house, I'd be scoping out emergency exits just in case I was found out. Which door would offer the quickest getaway, which second floor window was a leap away from a tree branch or a drain pipe, which bush in the garden would offer the darkest, safest hiding place if everything went wrong. Inside, my mind worked in the same way. I'd take a mental snapshot of the house I was in, the layout, the location of the furniture, how many locks were on the door. That way, even if the lights went out, I'd know where to run to avoid tripping or crashing into a wall. There's no greater shame for a burglar than cracking your shins on a coffee table or doing cartwheels over a footstool that you'd forgotten was there. The times I'd almost been caught, and there had been a handful, I'd only escaped because my brain had programmed in its routes and guided me to safety without me having to think about it. It was like being on autopilot. The adrenaline would kick in and I'd fly along the safest possible route until I was outside. I could almost see the thread of silver light leading me to safety, a trail that I had to follow or my life would be over, a trail that led from the unbearable confines of an unwelcoming house to the utter relief of fresh air. When I'd first arrived in Furnace, the escape artist in my mind had set to work right away, taking a snapshot of every room in the prison, poking and probing everything I knew about the place in search of the path of least resistance, the best possible way of escape. It had drawn a blank every time, except one. Just once, I'd imagined that silver thread, one occasion when I'd sensed fresh air and freedom beyond Furnace's impenetrable walls. Room 2. Z wouldn't stop talking as soon as I mentioned a way out. He practically leaped over the table, grabbing me by my collar, his eyes wide with desperation. I clamped a hand over his squawking mouth before the entire prison heard him. Then we walked to the most isolated part of the yard we could find, and I told him what I was thinking. "Have you heard anything more about the cave-in?" I asked, speaking as quietly as I could. There was nobody nearby, but in a place like this you never knew if the walls had ears. "Just that it happened a couple of months ago," he whispered back. "I heard some kid talking about it in the laundry. Roof came down, killed 30 guys and sent a load more through the vault door to the infirmary. They haven't come back, though." I nodded. Donovan had told me the same. It had been the worst disaster in Furnace, apparently, but the black suits just acted like it never happened. The room was sealed, and anyone caught talking about it got a day in the hole. "Didn't you notice the smell when we were standing outside the room that day?" I went on. He shook his head, confused. "Not so much a smell, just a sensation, something different, like a breath of fresh air." "It smelled less like sweaty teenage boys, I guess," was all he could manage. "Why, is that your way out?" I didn't say anything, and he raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on, Alex. Think about it. For starters, we're who knows how far underground. Even the biggest cave-in in history won't have opened up a path to the surface. You'd need an earthquake measuring like 1,000,000 on the Richter scale. It just isn't going to happen." I opened my mouth to argue, but it was no good. Z was on a roll. 2, you think that if by some freak of nature and blessing of God, a giant crack in the rock opened up to lead us out to salvation, that the guards in here would let us hammer away with pickaxes in the very next room. I mean, there isn't even a proper door on room 2, just a few planks of wood. That's kind of like tempting fate if you run a prison, don't you think? I chewed my lip, my brow furrowed. Z had caught me off guard. He was right, of course. What was I expecting? A miracle exit that nobody had spotted yet. But my mind kept circling back to the silver thread. I don't know what's in there, Z, I replied, casting my eyes across the vast yard to the crack that led to the chipping rooms, guarded, as always, by an armed black suit. I just know we need to find out. New fish. My head was buzzing with possibility as we made our way back across the yard, but Z was doing his best to undermine my escape fantasies. What next? He asked, grinning. The hand of God poking through the ceiling and offering us a lift to the surface. Z, I said, trying to ignore him. No, a magical escalator that the guards use to nip up and get their shopping. It probably leads to the local supermarket. We could just hop on and get some dinner for the walk home. That's not funny. A transporter, he cried out. Then, beam me up, Scotty. Give it a rest. I know, why don't we just find one of Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines and soar up the ventilation pipes? What? I asked, turning around and raising my arms. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just trying to show you how ridiculous the thought of escape is, he said, quietly this time. I mean, you stand a better chance just running into the elevator as the doors are closing and hoping that nobody sees you. I grimaced. That idea had occurred to me too. I was about to reply when, as if on cue, a gentle rumble came from above us, like distant thunder. The shouting and laughing and chatter in the yard instantly died away as the noise increased in volume, making the ground shake and dropping clouds of dust from the ceiling far above. The elevator was on its way down. Well, now's your chance, said Z, walking towards the yellow circle in the centre of the yard. I followed him, keeping my eye on the elevator doors as the lift lowered to our level. We'd seen it drop a couple of times now, twice with black suits wheeling in massive trolleys of supplies, and once with 5 ordinary Doberman dogs that were dragged squealing through the vault door. Other than that, the elevator had remained sealed. When it seemed it would never reach its destination, there was a crunch and the rumbling stopped. Half a minute later, the huge doors grated open, revealing 3 kids almost lost in the enormous interior. They hesitated when they saw the hundreds of unfriendly eyes glaring at them from the guts of furnace, and one of them started crying. I couldn't hear him from this distance, but the way his shoulders shook was unmistakable. "More new fish!" came a shout from the crowd that was gathering in the yellow circle, followed by a series of whoops and whistles. I noticed the skulls making their way towards the elevator door, one pulling a nasty black shank from the inside of his overalls. "Looks like they're getting the same warm welcome we did," said Z, thrusting his hands in his pockets and shuffling uncomfortably on the stone. Poor bastards. One of the new arrivals walked calmly from the elevator. He was tall and well-built, and the way he stood in front of Kevin and his posse made it clear he was no stranger to a fight or two. The skulls stared him down for a few seconds, then dismissed him, spreading out in front of the lift door to pick on the easier target inside. "Come on, you chickens!" screamed Kevin at the top of his voice. "Get out here now and get on your knees. I'm your boss now." 2 of the skulls leaped into the lift and grabbed the inmates, pulling them out and throwing them to the stone. One rolled and tried to get back to his feet before getting a kick to the chest that sent him sprawling. The other, who had been crying, just lay there and howled. The skulls laughed and imitated the sound. I felt my entire body burning with the desire to help, but my muscles so tense I thought they were going to snap. But what could I do? Charge in like an idiot again and risk somebody else getting chewed to pieces? Fortunately, the horrible scene was cut short by the siren, which sounded for a good few seconds while everybody crowded into the yellow circle in the yard. Kevin saw me scowling at him, and he rubbed his eyes as if he was pretending to cry. Then he ran a hand across his throat and pointed to me before turning his attention back to the elevator. The 2 boys who'd been dragged out were getting to their feet, the weeping lad being helped up by the other. Their faces were creased in agony and fear, and I shuddered, knowing that's what we must have looked like when we arrived. With a hiss and a roar, the vault door swung open to reveal the same horrendous group that had welcomed us a week ago. They prowled into the yard, all growls and wheezes and muffled screams, and even though they were some distance away, every single inmate in the prison shuffled backwards. Once again, I found that I couldn't focus on the warden, my eyes slipping off him each time like two opposing magnets held next to each other. Frustrated, I turned my attention to the gas masks, who shuddered and shook like rag dolls as the warden introduced the three boys to Furnace. It was impossible to tell if the Weezers were feeling any emotion because their faces were covered with metal and scars, but I thought I could make out a gleam of excitement in their piggy eyes as they studied the fresh pickings before them. "Maybe one of the new fish is a tunnelling expert," Z whispered to me as the warden gave his speech about rules. "That tall one looks like he might have already escaped from a couple of prisons." I laughed inside, not wanting to draw any attention from the freaks as the warden read out a series of names and numbers. The tall kid was Gary Owens, the weeping one was Ashley Garrett, and I had to choke back a sob as the name of the third kid was read out. Toby Merchant. I didn't know him, but the name Toby was almost too much to bear. I was assaulted by the memory of my best friend lying on the carpet, his head blossoming the same shade of red as a Valentine rose. It could have so easily been him here, and me decomposing in a quiet graveyard. I guess we were both dead and underground. One by one, the boys drifted off with their cellmates, and as the warden and his ghastly crew vanished behind the massive door, the shouts of "New fish and fresh meat" rose up again from the crowd, serenading the terrified inmates to their new home. It was terrible seeing even more new faces shovelled into Furnace, more fuel for the horrors to devour in the dead of night, more innocent victims, no doubt, forced into their rawest nightmares. The siren blew, letting the crowd disperse, and my attention returned to thoughts of escape. I jogged up the stairs towards my cell, Z hot on my tail and still bombarding me with crazy ideas, including stuffing my sheet into my uniform and pretending to be one of the muscular black suits. I ignored him as I made my way down the platform, entering to see Donovan sitting on his bunk, idly picking his nose. He looked at me distastefully, then flicked something in my direction. "Haven't you got better things to be doing, Sawyer?" he said with a sneer, "like trying to get us all killed? Why don't you start another fight? This time you might get lucky and bring the dogs and the Weezers up here." I walked to the bed and leaned against the wall, running a hand through my hair and sighing loudly. "I couldn't just lie there not knowing what was going on," I said eventually. It was a lame excuse for something that could have got us both dragged away, but at least it was the truth. "Besides, you saw that thing. It wasn't interested in us. It knew exactly where it was going." "You wouldn't be so damn cocky now if it had marked the door," Donovan spat back. "You'd be strung up somewhere beneath Furnace, having your skin ripped off and your eyes skewered or something." I felt my stomach turn and did my best to ignore his remarks. Donovan wiped a hand beneath his nose and sniffed loudly, looking me in the eye as if wanting something. "Okay, I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I really am. Come on, I've hardly been here any time. I didn't know how serious it all was." Donovan nodded gently, but his eyes never left mine. I paused, not quite sure what I was saying. "I just want to be doing something to help get us out here. I don't want to be curled up and cowering in the dark when those things come for me, okay?" "What else is there to do?" was his emotionless reply. "He thinks we can make a break for it," said Z, smiling at Donovan as if he was talking about a silly child. "He thinks there's a way out." "Oh yeah, there are plenty of ways," Donovan said, rummaging under his mattress and pulling out a small wooden shank. I was surprised to see it, but I guess everybody in Furnace needs some way of protecting themselves. He started scratching the rock wall, the homemade blade not even leaving a mark. "Just pick a spot and start digging. If nobody catches you, I reckon you can make it out in, say, 1,000 years. He tossed the shank back onto his bed, then leaped nimbly onto the floor, barging past me and standing at the bars of the cell, looking down into the yard. I sat on the bottom bunk and tried to ignore my frustration. In the relative silence, I heard the sound of screaming from nearby, but I tuned it out. "Tell me what you know about the cave-in," I asked after a while. "In room 2. Donovan snorted. "That was my reaction too," Z said, sniggering. I wanted to leap up and slap him, but I managed to control my temper and settled for a mean glare. He mouthed the words, "Sorry," and let me carry on. "Something happened in there," I went on. "Those kids hit a fault line or something. I could smell it, Donovan. I could smell the fresh air." "It was your imagination, you chump," he replied, resting his head against the bars. "Maybe someone let rip when you were standing next to them and you felt the draft." You were there too the other day. Didn't you sense something? Anything? Yeah, I sense it every time I walk into a room in here. I hope and pray that there might just be a hole in the rock and we can all make a run for it. Sometimes I hope so much that I can see the way out. I can smell the rain. I can hear the birds. But I can't. It's just an illusion. They say that hope can set you free, and I guess that's what it is. A tiny glimpse of freedom to keep us sane, if you follow me. It wasn't an illusion, I snapped. I'm telling you, it was real. I didn't make it up. I thought back, remembering the sensation of being outside, of mountains and wind and endless views. Maybe it had just been an illusion, maybe my brain's way of coping with the thought of never going above ground again. I guess it made sense. I mean, I knew that Furnace could do funny things to your mind, but something deep inside me wouldn't let it rest, was screaming at me not to give up. I knew that inner voice well, the instincts that I had followed all the time when I was just robbing Hauser. Sorry. Fine, maybe it was just my imagination, I said, but what if it wasn't? What if there's a way out? Isn't it worth a look? Feel free, muttered Donovan. I'm not stopping you. But we need your help, Dee, I added. We can't do this alone. You mean you can't do this alone, Z said, looking at me with a concerned expression. Less of this we business, please. I looked at Donovan for a response, but he had straightened and was staring down into the yard with an expression of disbelief. No way, he said with a laugh. No way is he taking on the skulls. I jumped off the bed and ran through the cell door to the platform. 6 floors beneath me, I made out a small circle of people, each wearing a painted bandana and an unsettled expression. In the middle of the circle, prowling around like a caged tiger, was the tall, calm new boy, Gary Owens. Donovan and Z rushed to my side and watched as Gary raised his hands, inviting the skulls to throw a punch. Some had pulled shanks from inside their overalls, but nobody was making the first move. He is either the bravest kid or the biggest idiot on the planet, said Donovan, his tone almost respectful. I'm not sure why, but I suddenly felt a surge of jealousy that my cellmate was so impressed with him. Idiot, I'd say, I muttered. He's going to die down there. I saw Kevin walking up to Gary. The new kid was almost a head taller than the leader of the skulls, but Kevin didn't seem to care. His face was red, his expression apoplectic, all bulging eyes and foaming mouth. He grabbed Gary by the collar and started screaming at him. The acoustics in the prison weren't great, but from up here we got the gist, just like everybody else in Furnace who had stopped what they were doing to see what was going on. Think you can march in here and take over? Kevin screamed, along with a few choice expletives. He was shaking Gary, but the big boy wasn't folding. He was studying Kevin with a look of cold detachment, a look that reminded me of a spider's emotionless glare right before it bites into its prey. Gonna kill you, new fish! Gonna skewer you! He pushed Gary back, and a number of skulls grabbed his overalls, holding him in place. A length of gleaming silver had appeared in Kevin's hand, and he waved it menacingly in front of Gary's face. Even the tough kids learn the rules pretty quickly in here, Donovan said. I wasn't so sure. With a twist of his body, Gary sent one of the skulls holding him skittering across the stone floor, then smashed his free fist into the face of his other captor. The boy's legs buckled with the impact and he fell to the floor, his landing spot already marked out by the blood gushing from his nose. Kevin screeched like a wild animal and backed away, motioning for his henchmen to attack, but nobody moved. They weren't mafia enforcers, they were kids. Gary strode forward and grabbed Kevin's arm, bending it in such a way that the shank fell from his grip. The skull was yelling in pain, his fury replaced by fear. Kill him! Kevin yelled to dead ears. Cut his heart out! This is great, said Donovan. Kevin's been asking for it ever since he arrived. About time he got some himself. Hope the new kids rough him up a bit. Gary kept twisting Kevin's arm, using both hands to bend back the wrist to an impossible angle until, in horrible unison, a crack and a scream echoed across the yard. The prison had been plunged into silence, everybody watching as Kevin dropped to his knees, clutching his broken arm, tears streaming down his face. Gary placed a foot on Kevin's shoulder and sent him sprawling, and at once a huge cheer broke out from the inmates. This is great, Donovan repeated with more enthusiasm. How the mighty have fallen, eh? You think this means we'll be free of the skulls? Z asked. Reckon so, Donovan replied. Maybe he'll take out the 59ers as well. Gary bent down and snatched the bandana from Kevin's head and the shank from the floor. He held them up in the air for us all to see, like trophies. Some of the other kids had gone right up to the boy, circling him as if he'd just scored the winning goal in a soccer match. One inmate had even put his arm around him and was jumping up and down. Want to go and join in the celebrations? Z asked. But I stayed where I was. Something wasn't right. Gary wasn't smiling. He didn't look like somebody who'd come to save us. He eyed the crowd around him with the same dead gaze that he had given the skulls. Then, with a flash of silver and an arc of crimson, the boy who had been holding him staggered across the yard, looking at the wound on his arm with disbelief. The inmates turned their shocked expressions towards Gary, as if there had been some mistake, but the new kid slashed out again, catching another victim in the chest. For a moment, the yard was chaos as the prisoners climbed over one another to get to safety. In the centre of the maelstrom, Gary tucked the stained shank into his overalls and pulled the skull bandana over his head. I felt my heart sinking. He wasn't a saviour. He was a psychopath. The siren blasted out across the yard, a fitting funeral dirge for the boys who lay squirming in their crimson coffins. Donovan pushed himself off the railings. Like I said, Alex, he said as he watched the injured kids fold into themselves, all sobs and snot. It's the only thing we can do. Curl up and cower and wait for death. Oh, okay, sorry about that. I was all over the place in that one. I was tripping over my own tongue. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be back tomorrow. Steal these. For part 11. Part 11? I think it's part 11. I've completely lost track. But anyway, I hope you're enjoying it. For those of you who are wondering about the Leonardo da Vinci reference, I don't know, you might not even be thinking about it. It is a reference to when Z is saying, we could just steal one of Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines and sail up the tunnels. That is a reference to my first ever novel called The Inventors, which I wrote with my little brother when he was 9. It's my first ever published book. And I can't even find it now. And at the end of that book, spoiler alert, they use one of Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines to soar up the tunnel and escape a certain place. I won't tell you where and whether they were successful, just in case you want to read it. I can't even find it now, but it's in there somewhere. So The Inventors is available now on Amazon if anyone is interested in reading it. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all well. And I will see you tomorrow. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.